friends, and welcome back to my channel. Maiga here, and if you're new here, hi, my name is Maiga Vidal. I'm a musical theater writer, and welcome back to my channel, and where I take you through the musical writing process from page to stage. We've had some stage this year, which is really exciting, but now we are back on the page. So I want to walk you through April of 2023 and really an experiment that I did, which is writing a page of my musical every day for 30 days. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's talk about April and End of Play. End of Play is a Dramatists Guild event hosted every year where people in the theater writing community attempt to write a new play or musical in a month. I participated in my first one last year. It's sort of like the theater writing people's NaNoWriMo. It's actually like a really significant event for me. It's how I met one of my best friends. Amanda and I celebrated our 1-year anniversary this year. We were brought together by End of Play and the theater community online. The caveat, however, the big problem, was that I had just had my musical premiere in New York City, the excerpt, which I made a whole video about if you're interested, and also you can watch the performance. I will link it below. And I had worked on that from pretty much like the beginning of January all the way through like mid-March. So to say I was burnt out is an understatement, but I did still want to participate, and this was a great time to run my experiment. What I did is I just defined the rules. It's very simple. Write a page before midnight every day, and a page defined by final draft. And I could call it a day. Like, there are some days where I could write more, but as long as I got one page in, I was on the other side. And so those are the rules of the experiment. And so now I want to talk to you about some of like my experiences with it. And then I do have some analytics. I don't know how long this video is going to be because I'm just improvising right now. Okay, so I lied. First, let's talk about statistics. So April is composed of 30 days. My success rate of writing every day over this 30-day period was 70%. Now, there were some days where it was literally impossible to write for several reasons. The primary one being like I had other things to work on, like my job, in which, I'm a freelancer and I also work from home. So there are some days where I just don't have the mental capacity to write. And there are also other days where I just had something that was more important than writing. But on average, I wrote about 5 to 6 days a week, which means I was just basically taking my weekends off, which is kind of normal if I was treating this as a job, to not work the weekends and have those rest days. So 70% is actually quite good in my opinion, but I did try and keep tabs every day over on Instagram so that I would be able to go back and remember exactly what I did, which is really important because, as you guys know, I vlog to remember what I've done and what works, and being able to look back at those images and being able to watch this video back, I'll know, okay, this is the thing that worked for you during this time. But in total, I ended up writing 57 new pages of my musical. Now, I want to put a little asterisk in here. It doesn't mean that it's 57 new pages of my musical. I would say I have about now-ish, in the middle of May. What's the 25th right now? So towards the end of May, I have about 30 pages of finalized material book-wise for my musical, which means I don't have music and lyrics finalized yet, but the book of the story, the dialogue, is pretty much set in stone. The beats, the arcs are just kind of flowing together. During that month, I rewrote the first 2 scenes like 6 times. I just rewrote those same scenes over and over and over again because I just wasn't getting the feel for the musical that I wanted from the way I was attacking it. And I think that comes from the fact that as an avid outliner, I really do have a vision for sort of every scene in a show, but you can only really know your characters once you write them in the scene, and sometimes you need to develop that voice more than once. I have found that I can usually, during this process, very eye-opening, I can write like 2 or 3 scenes out, and then I'm like, okay, there's too many mistakes. I don't know how I'm gonna fit what I have now with what was coming if I don't go back and fix it now. In my first attempt at this musical, which I did during NaNoWriMo last year, I tried to just keep writing through and just making notes as I went along of things that I was going to fix. But when I actually went back to try and like rework the draft, it was completely unusable because I didn't know what I meant meant. And so I had to sort of read backwards, and I didn't love the ending of my show in the original draft, and then I didn't like the setup scene to that, and so I ended up writing things that were not functional or useful. And so I find that sort of digging my way in, 4 scenes in, going back, polishing it up, making sure that it's like perfectly done, and then going a bit forward is the vibe. I don't know if that's how people like do mining or bridges, but that's how I assume that they do these kind of long form projects that you need to sort of build some structure in before you head your way and go forward. So that's what I found works for me. Would not have figured that out if I hadn't committed to this experiment. It's something that I had an inkling about, but because it's such a long-term thing, like you have to do it for a couple of days, you have to write a big amount of work before you can go back and fix it. It's easier, so much easier to redraft than it is to like write on the empty page. I just needed to write a lot of material and go back and fix it. And the only way to do that is to write a lot of material over a lot of days. And as someone who is a binge writer, I'm notorious for writing very quickly, super fast, lots of information, and then just re-polishing it, refiling it over and over and over. And I just needed to do this for a long amount of time to be like, is this my routine? Is this the way I actually attack the writing process? Or is this just something I do because of like panic and anxiety and being only able to write when I have a deadline on me? Turns out, nope. My actual writing style is to write a lot, go back and fix it, write a lot, go back and fix it. It isn't just what I do when I'm stressed or I have a deadline. And that feels good to know about myself, that means that I can attack a little bit every day. Another thing is that having a small goal, like 1 page a day, really helps overcome my ADHD paralysis. So as I mentioned, as a binge writer, some days I sit down and knock out like 3 scenes. And I know exactly how they're gonna go, and the dialogue is just flowing out of me, and I know that out of those dialogue, out of that monologue that I'm writing, I'm gonna be able to build the song that I need with the right vibe, the right language. I've figured out the way this character talks. But then there are other days where it was literally impossible to get a word on the page. But because I had this really small goal, 1 page on final draft, and I didn't even need to write it on final draft, and I'll talk about kind of where I attacked this, but it was just like 16 lines of dialogue would do it, because like in the final draft setting, like you have to put, and this is in musicals as well, you have to put like the character name, this line of dialogue, and there's a space above and beneath that. And so some days it was literally 11:30 p.m. and I hadn't written a single page that day. But at 11:30, I was like, I can do it. I can pump out a page, because I had set this mini deadline that gave me just enough panic to be able to kickstart. And then sometimes I just keep on writing. And sometimes it was literally like, the page is done, close my laptop, or shut off my computer and go to bed. But it still counts. On my calendar, I literally have an all day thing for it. And then I just change the color and it's done. That's how I know I've done it. And that little click in my calendar is so satisfying, because then I can go back in my calendar and see how many days I've written. That's why it was so easy to keep stats, because it was literally there. And I got a reminder every day, and it was always in the back of my mind, but there was no pressure, right? Like some days I'd wake up and I'd write the page, and then I'd keep writing the rest of the day. Then I know at 11:30, oh, this is gonna run out, and tomorrow you're gonna have to delete it if you didn't write it, you know? Just enough motivation to get 1 page done. Okay, I've been rambling about the same thing. That's what happens when I don't really script a video with too many bullet points. But last thing I wanna talk about is what I used to sustain myself through this process. First is I gave myself the freedom after the first and second day where I was writing on final draft, and that felt like, oh, this is the draft that's gonna be it. I started to get stressed about writing the wrong words. And so I gave myself permission to be able to draft on anything else. So what I did is I actually created notes, like on the notes app. I just created new pages and just dumped my ideas in there. Whatever came to mind. I have voice memos in there while I was recording and sitting at the piano. Anything that came to mind as I was working through, I put into these large files with no page. It is all just one big long blob, and that helped lay the pressure off of me to write like good words and to just write everything down. And then I can go into final draft. It doesn't have to be the same day, right? 16 lines of dialogue will complete as 1 page. But then I could take this like word vomit, this draft, everything that came to my head, and reshape it and essentially rewrite it into a cleaner version, and then keep drafting. Also, a lot of days I just honestly did research, or I outlined the page. There was a day where, like, for example, I outlined Act 1 again, but now I have an exact flow of where Act 1 is going to go, Act 1 and Act 2 of the 3-act structure. I also ended up making a smaller version just to check off for the book of the page, just because sometimes I'm like, okay, if I have an idea for a lyric, should I stop and do it, or can I just keep writing? And it's just like, nope, you're just focusing on the book right now. You're focusing on beats and dialogue, and you can write the songs in dialogue or in monologue right now. So you're free to just sort of explore the way the story is flowing first. And some days it was just like working out rhymes, having the feel for the song, have the emphasis on the right syllable, all that sort of information that comes from working on a lyric for a while. And that still counts as one page, right? Like, this is double-sided. That's still one page of material that I wrote. And I actually got rid of the song that I wrote, but it was a good exercise in getting me where I was going and figuring out the scenes. Again, I just keep re-outlining the beats in the scenes because I'm focusing on the story flow and stuff like that. And yeah, I think that's sort of the end of the video. It's a bit of a rambly one. If you have any questions about the writing process, or if this is something you've done, please let me know below. I'm very interested to hear about other people's writing process, especially if you don't write musical theater. I think it's really interesting. But yeah, that's my April update, and I will see you soon with May. Bye-bye.